Not a sweet smile, not a polite one. A smile that came from somewhere deep inside me, somewhere sharp and quiet. The place grief can't reach when betrayal already burned everything down. People saw it. I felt the air change as heads turned. The pastor paused mid-sentence. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, like it was waiting to hear what kind of woman smiles at her husband's funeral. My hands were folded in my lap, black gloves tight on my fingers, my nails pressing into my palms so hard I could have drawn blood. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Because I had promised myself one thing the night before, I would not break in public. Not today. Not in front of them. Not in front of him. The chapel smelled like lilies and cold stone. There were too many flowers, white, innocent, pretending this was a clean ending. The coffin sat at the front like a final insult, polished dark wood reflecting the stained glass colors across the room. A beautiful box for an ugly truth. His mother sat in the first row, shoulders stiff, mouth pressed tight like a stitched wound. Beside her, his sister dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, performing grief the way she performed everything else, carefully, for the audience. I was placed 2 rows behind them. Not at the front. Not family. Not the widow. Just me. I heard whispers as I walked in earlier. That's her. She doesn't look sad. Did she even cry? The truth was, I'd cried enough to drown a city, but the tears were for the woman I used to be, not for the man in the box. The service crawled forward in slow, holy sentences. Scriptures. Memories. A hymn nobody sang right. I stared at the coffin and let my mind drift, not away, but inward. I kept seeing the ring. Not on my finger, on the little velvet pillow in my dresser drawer, where I'd placed it 2 nights ago like a dead thing I didn't want touching my skin. That ring had been my whole life once. My proof. My forever. Now it felt like a shackle I'd finally slipped free of. The pastor finished a reading and asked if anyone wanted to say a few words. Silence. Then a chair creaked. I turned my head and saw him. No, not him. Him. Darren's best friend, Caleb, rising from the side aisle, jaw tight, eyes glassy. Caleb had always been too close. Too loyal. The kind of man who stayed quiet while the house caught fire because he didn't want to offend the person holding the match. He cleared his throat. Darren was a complicated man, he began, and that alone made people sit up. Funerals didn't usually allow complicated. I watched the room like a storm watcher. Caleb's gaze flickered toward me, just for a second, then away again. And then I knew. Whatever Caleb was about to say wasn't for Darren, it was for me. People only see what they want, he continued. They see the suit, the smile, the promotions, the big house. But they don't see the late-night fights, the slammed doors, the choices. A few heads lifted, startled. Darren's mother stiffened like someone had pulled a thread in her spine. Caleb swallowed. I'm not here to paint him as a saint. I'm here because I owe it to the truth. The word truth hit me like a bell. A soft murmur ran through the room. His sister's eyes narrowed. Caleb hesitated, then said, there were mistakes made. Things said that can't be taken back. Things done that, he ped, breathing hard, and I know funerals are for forgiveness, but Caleb, Darren's mother snapped, low but sharp, a warning. He looked at her, then at the coffin, then, finally, at me. And the chapel went so quiet I could hear my heartbeat thudding under my ribs like a fist against a locked door. Caleb said, I'm sorry, Mara. My name, not Mrs. Hawthorne, not the widow, Mara. My throat tightened, but my face stayed still. Caleb's voice cracked. I'm sorry for what he put you through. That was when Darren's sister rose suddenly, fury in her eyes. This is not the time, but Caleb was already falling apart, words spilling like he couldn't hold them back anymore. She deserved better. Then Darren's mother stood too, trembling with contained rage. her grief turning into something ugly. "You will sit down right now." Caleb didn't. He looked at me like a man begging to be forgiven for being a coward too long. And then, like a knife finally twisting, he said it. "The last thing Darren said about you wasn't kind." A collective inhale. I didn't move. Caleb continued, voice shaking. He told me, "I'm not her husband anymore. She's not my wife anymore." And the room froze. It wasn't just a cruel sentence. It was a declaration, a rejection, a public erasing, like I was nothing, like I'd never been anything. Darren's mother gasped, scandalized, at Caleb, not Darren. Darren's sister looked at me as if she expected me to collapse. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh my God," and right then, with a chapel full of eyes slicing into my back, Caleb added the detail that made my stomach go cold. "He said it last week," Caleb finished, "before the accident. He said it like it was already done. Before the accident. Before the crash that took Darren's life on that rain-slick highway. Before the police officer stood at my door at 2:17 a.m., hat in hand, eyes avoiding mine, saying words that landed like stones. There's been an accident. I'm sorry. Are you Mara Hawthorne? I had said yes. I had cried then. The kind of cry that steals your breath. The kind that makes you believe grief is the sharpest thing that exists. But now I understood why my grief had always felt incomplete. Because somewhere inside me, even that night, something had whispered, "You're mourning the idea, not the man." I let Caleb's words sink in. I let the entire chapel witness what they assumed was the moment that would break me. Then I smiled. It wasn't revenge yet, not fully. It was recognition. Because when Caleb repeated Darren's cruel line, it didn't hurt the way it was meant to. Instead, it unlocked a door inside me. A door Darren had spent years trying to keep shut. Behind it was every secret I had swallowed, every humiliation I had swallowed, every late-night apology that tasted like poison, every "it's not what it looks like," every "you're overreacting," every "if you loved me, you'd let it go." Behind that door was the truth Darren never imagined would outlive him. And as I sat there in that chapel, surrounded by lilies and lies, I thought, "You really said I'm not your wife anymore? Fine. Then you won't mind what I do next." My smile widened just slightly as I looked at the coffin, and for the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't fear. I felt power. Because Darren didn't die without leaving me something. He left me evidence. He left me the keys. He left me a letter I wasn't supposed to find. And he left me the one object that would make every person in this chapel choke on their perfect grief. I shifted my gaze to the front row, to Darren's mother, to Darren's sister, to the polished coffin. And I thought about the little silver locket sitting in my purse right now, heavy as a confession. A locket Darren told me was lost. A locket I found hidden behind the loose baseboard in his office. A locket with a photo inside. Not of me. Not of our wedding. Not of anything holy. I exhaled slowly through my nose. The pastor cleared his throat, trying to pull the service back into control. But it was too late. The truth had already entered the room. And it was sitting quietly in my purse, waiting. Just like I was. The service ended the way most funerals do, awkwardly, quietly, with people unsure whether they were allowed to breathe again. Chairs scraped softly against stone, coats were gathered, tears were dabbed. The pastor murmured closing blessings no one really heard. Everyone pretended nothing strange had happened, even though the air was thick with unfinished sentences. I stayed seated. I always stayed seated. People notice that sort of thing. A woman who doesn't rush toward the coffin. A woman who doesn't clutch it like a lifeline. A woman who doesn't fall apart when she's supposed to. I felt eyes on me as the room emptied in polite clusters. Some curious, some judgmental, some afraid I might say something inappropriate. They didn't know how right they were. When the chapel was nearly empty, Darren's mother approached me. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, each step precise, controlled. She ped a full arm's length away, as if grief were contagious. "You embarrassed us," she said quietly, venom wrapped in silk. I looked up at her. Her face was pale, lips trembling, not from sadness, but from fury. I didn't say a word. "You smiled," she snapped. "At my son's funeral." At the truth, I replied calmly. Her eyes flickered. "You don't get to rewrite who he was." I stood then, smoothing my dress, feeling taller than I had in years. I didn't rewrite anything. Darren did. She opened her mouth to argue, but her sister, Darren's aunt, always the family fixer, placed a hand on her arm. "Let it go," she whispered. "Not here." Darren's mother leaned closer, her breath sharp with coffee and grief. "Whatever you think you know," she said, "you will keep it to yourself." I held her gaze. "I kept everything to myself for 12 years. Her face hardened. "This family protected you." I almost laughed. Protected me. From what? From Darren's temper? From his secrets? From the nights he came home smelling like another woman's perfume and told me I was imagining things? I nodded once. "Then you'll understand why I'm done protecting him." She recoiled as if slapped. Without another word, she turned and walked away. I waited until the chapel was empty before I approached the coffin. Up close it looked smaller, like Darren had shrunk in death. The man who once filled rooms with his voice, his opinions, his presence, now contained in polished wood and silence. I didn't touch it. I didn't pray. I leaned in just enough to whisper, "You should have kept your mouth shut." Then I turned and left. The repast was held at Darren's childhood home, the one his parents insisted on calling the house as if no other homes existed. White siding, trimmed hedges, a place where nothing ugly was ever acknowledged out loud. I almost didn't go. But the locket weighed heavy in my purse, and something in me knew this wasn't finished. The living room was packed with mourners clutching paper plates and plastic forks. Conversations floated above me like static. He was such a good provider. "She's holding up well, don't you think?" I always thought they seemed tense. I caught fragments, lies dressed as memories. Darren's sister blocked my path near the fireplace. "You need to leave." I tilted my head. "I live in his house. I think I'm allowed to eat a sandwich." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't do anything stupid." I smiled faintly. "I've been stupid for years. I'm retired." Before she could respond, Caleb appeared beside me, eyes rimmed red. "Mara," he said softly, "can I talk to you?" We stepped onto the back porch. Cold air slapped my cheeks, grounding me. The yard looked the same as always. Oak tree, bird feeder, trimmed grass. A frozen snapshot of a life Darren had long outgrown. Caleb shoved his hands into his pockets. "I shouldn't have said that in there." "No," I replied. "You shouldn't have waited so long." He winced. "I didn't know how." "I do," I said. "You stay quiet until it's safer to speak." He nodded slowly. "He wasn't kind to you." "No. He talked about leaving." "I know." He blinked. "You do?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the locket. His breath caught. "Where did you get that?" "Behind a loose baseboard," I said. "In his office. The one he locked." Caleb stared at it like it might explode. He said he lost it years ago. So he told everyone. I clicked it open. Inside was the photograph that had cracked my world in half the night I found it. Darren. And another woman. Her head on his shoulder, his hand around her waist. Intimate. Casual. Familiar. Not a mistake. A life. Caleb swallowed hard. "That's not the first," I said. "Just the one he kept." Caleb closed his eyes. "Mara, I'm so sorry." I studied his face. "Do you know her?" He hesitated. That was answer enough. "She worked with him," he admitted. "Years ago. I think he loved her." I laughed softly. Not hysterically, not bitterly, just tired. "He loved the idea of being adored," I said. "It didn't matter by whom." Caleb hesitated. His will, I looked at him sharply. "What about it?" "He changed it." he said. Recently. My stomach dropped. To what? To exclude you. The world tilted. Excuse me? He told his lawyer you were already separated, Caleb continued. That you'd agreed. Agreed. The word tasted like rust. So everything goes to his family, Caleb finished. And a trust. For who? Caleb didn't answer. I didn't need him to. The locket clicked shut in my hand. I slipped it back into my purse, pulse pounding, not with fear, but with clarity. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For confirming something. I turned back toward the house, where Darren's family laughed too loudly over grief casseroles. Caleb caught my arm. Mara, be careful. I met his gaze. I've been careful my entire marriage. Inside, Darren's sister raised her glass, tapping it for attention. Before everyone leaves, she announced, we want to thank you all for coming. Darren meant so much to so many. I stepped forward. The room fell silent. I'd like to say something, I said. Gasps, whispers, panic in Darren's mother's eyes. This was not planned. This was not approved. But it was inevitable. I was married to Darren for 12 years, I began, and I've been told today that I'm not his wife anymore. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. So I won't speak as his wife, I continued. I'll speak as someone who knew him better than most. Darren's sister hissed my name. I ignored her. There are objects we keep, I said, my voice steady, that tell the truth when people won't. Rings, letters, lockets. A few people shifted uneasily. I found one of those objects recently, I said, and it taught me something important. I paused. Closure doesn't come from silence, I finished. It comes from honesty. I set my empty glass down. I won't take more of your time. Then I walked out. Behind me, the house buzzed like a disturbed hive. But I didn't look back, because the truth had already begun to do its work. And this was only the beginning. I didn't go home that night. Home was a word that still smelled like Darren, his cologne clinging to the walls, his shoes lined with military precision by the door, his silence filling every corner like smoke. I wasn't ready to breathe that air yet. Instead, I drove. No music, no destination, just the hum of tires against asphalt and the rhythmic blink of streetlights passing like slow heartbeats. Somewhere around midnight, I pulled into a quiet overlook by the river. The same river Darren once proposed beside, dropping to one knee with shaking hands and a ring that felt like a promise instead of a trap. I sat there in the car, engine off, the locket heavy in my purse, and let the memories come. Not the good ones, the real ones. The first lie I caught him in wasn't dramatic. It never is. It was small, too small to matter, he said. A meeting that ran late. A phone call he took outside. A name he said too casually. You're imagining things, he'd told me, smiling like I was cute when I was insecure. You always do this. And I believed him. Because believing him was easier than believing my entire life was built on quicksand. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, breathing slowly, grounding myself in the present. Darren was gone. But his choices weren't. And now, apparently, neither was the damage. The next morning I went home. The house greeted me with silence and dust motes dancing in pale sunlight. It looked exactly the same, and somehow completely foreign, like I'd broken into someone else's life. I walked straight to Darren's office. The locked room, the one space I'd never been welcome in. I'd found the loose baseboard by accident, kneeling down weeks ago to retrieve a dropped earring. My fingers brushed against something hollow. Something wrong. That was the night everything cracked open. Now, in the daylight, the office felt less ominous, but more damning. I opened drawers. Cabinets. Files. Darren had always loved order, loved control. Every paper neatly labeled, every receipt saved, including the ones he never expected me to see. Hotel invoices, gifts, jewelry receipts, letters written in a handwriting that wasn't mine. I sat at his desk and read them all. Not in a rush, not with tears. Like a coroner reviewing a body, methodical, detached, determined to understand how the death happened. One letter stood out. It wasn't romantic, it was logistical. I told her I was done, Darren had written, that my wife doesn't matter anymore. I stared at the words until they blurred. So that's how he said it. Not with guilt, not with hesitation, like I was an inconvenience he'd already stepped over. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my purse beside the locket. Evidence. Because grief fades. Truth doesn't. By afternoon, the calls started. Darren's mother left 3 voicemails. His sister texted twice. The lawyer called once, formal and distant, requesting a meeting to clarify my standing. My standing. As if marriage were a suggestion instead of a contract. I returned the lawyer's call. We met the next day. The office smelled like leather and lemon cleaner. The lawyer, a man Darren had golfed with for years, couldn't quite meet my eyes. "I'll be honest," he said. "This situation is complicated." "I like complicated," I replied. "It usually means someone lied." He cleared his throat. "Darren filed an amendment to his will 6 months ago." I nodded. "I know." He looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes." He slid a folder toward me. "He claimed you were separated. Did he provide proof?" The lawyer hesitated. "No." "Did he file for divorce?" "No." "Then, legally," I said, "I'm still his wife." Silence. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "That's correct." Relief didn't come. Anger did. "So why am I being treated like a stranger?" I asked. He glanced at the folder. "Because Darren wanted it that way." I smiled thinly. "Darren doesn't get what he wants anymore." The lawyer blinked. I opened my purse and placed the locket and letter on his desk. His face drained of color. "I found these," I said, "along with financial records that suggest my husband used marital funds to support another relationship." The lawyer swallowed hard. "This changes things." Yes, I agreed. It changes everything. When I left that office, the world felt sharper, brighter. Like someone had adjusted the focus. For the first time since Darren died, I felt, ahead of the story. But victory didn't last long. That evening, Darren's sister showed up at my door. Unannounced, unwelcome. She stood on the porch like she owned it, arms crossed, jaw set. "You're causing problems." "I've been causing problems for years," I replied calmly. "You just didn't notice." She scoffed. "This little performance? You think it makes you look strong?" "I don't care how I look," I said. "I care about what's true." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You walk away now, quietly, and we'll make sure you're comfortable." I laughed. "You're trying to buy my silence. We're trying to protect his legacy." I met her eyes. "From what?" She hesitated. "Exactly." "I didn't break Darren," I said. "I survived him." Her face twisted. "You always wanted more." "Yes," I said. "Respect." She turned and left without another word. That night, I opened the locket one more time. I studied the photo, not with jealousy, but curiosity. Who was she, really? What promises had Darren made her? Did he tell her I didn't matter? Did he tell her I was already gone? I realized something then. There was one truth still missing. And I wasn't done until I had it. I took out my phone, I searched her name, and when I found her profile, smiling, confident, very much alive, I felt the final piece click into place. The funeral wasn't the end. It was the opening scene. And now, it was my turn to ask questions. Her name was Elise. I said it out loud once, sitting alone at my kitchen table, just to see how it felt in my mouth. It didn't burn. It didn't sting. It didn't even make my chest tighten. That surprised me. For years, I'd imagined the other woman as a shadow, faceless, evil, deliberate. Someone who knew exactly what she was doing and did it anyway. But the woman smiling back at me from my phone screen didn't look like a villain. She looked ordinary. Bright eyes. Soft laugh. A life full of brunches and weekend hikes and photos taken by someone who loved her enough to kneel for the perfect angle. I wondered how many of those photos Darren had taken. I wondered how many lies lived just outside the frame. I didn't message her that night. I wasn't ready. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked through the house, touching things I'd avoided for years. The back of the couch where I'd slept after arguments. The dent in the hallway wall from the night he slammed the door too hard. The kitchen counter where I once cried silently while he took a call in the other room, laughing. The house had always known. I just hadn't listened. I ped in the bedroom. Darren's side of the closet still hung untouched, shirts pressed, shoes lined up like soldiers awaiting orders that would never come. I opened a drawer and found his watch, the one he wore when he wanted to look important. I held it in my hand, feeling its weight, remembering the way he used to glance at it when I talked too long. Time was always more valuable than me. I placed the watch back and closed the drawer. That life was finished. The next morning, I messaged Elise. Simple, calm, no accusations. Hi, my name is Mara. I believe we both knew Darren. I'd like to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. She replied 2 hours later. I've been expecting this. Those 4 words told me everything. We agreed to meet at a small cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. I arrived early. The cafe smelled like espresso and cinnamon. Soft music played overhead, the kind meant to soothe. I chose a table by the window and waited, hands wrapped around a warm mug I didn't drink from. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately. Not from the photo, from the posture, the way she held herself like someone who'd learned to brace for impact. She spotted me, hesitated, then approached. Mara, she said softly. Elise. We sat. Silence stretched between us, heavy but not hostile. I'm sorry, she said finally. Not I didn't know, not it wasn't my fault, just I'm sorry, that mattered. How long, I asked. She exhaled. 4 years. 4, I nodded slowly. He told you I didn't matter anymore. Her eyes filled. He told me you were already gone. Of course he did. He said you were cold, she continued, that you didn't love him, that you stayed for convenience. I almost laughed. I stayed because he convinced me love looked like endurance, I said. She nodded, tears slipping free now. He told me he'd leave. When? Soon, she whispered. Always soon. I reached into my purse and placed the locket on the table. Her breath caught. He gave me that, she said. Said it was a symbol of his freedom. I swallowed. He told me it was lost. We sat with that truth between us. 2 women. 1 man. A lifetime of lies. He changed his will, I said. Her head snapped up. What? He tried to erase me. Her face crumpled. He promised he'd take care of me. Of course he did. Darren never planned for the future. He planned for the moment. He didn't win, I said quietly. She looked at me, confused. He doesn't get to rewrite us, I continued. Either of us. Elise wiped her cheeks. What do you want from me? I considered the question carefully. I want the truth, I said. All of it, and I want you to have peace. Her shoulders shook. I don't think I ever will. I reached across the table, surprising us both, and rested my hand near hers, not touching, just close enough. Peace doesn't come from him, I said. It comes from what we do next. She nodded slowly. When we left the cafe, we didn't hug. We didn't promise friendship. But something unspoken passed between us, an understanding that we were no longer enemies in a story neither of us wrote. That night I slept better than I had in years, not because I'd forgiven Darren, but because I finally ped carrying his secrets alone. The reading of the will happened a week later. Darren's family filled the lawyer's office with stiff smiles and thin patience. They looked at me like I was an inconvenience that refused to disappear. The lawyer cleared his throat. Due to newly presented evidence, he said carefully, certain provisions will need to be reviewed. Darren's mother's face tightened. Additionally, he continued, Mrs. Hawthorne remains the legal spouse. The word remains echoed like thunder. Darren's sister shot me a glare sharp enough to cut. I didn't flinch. They could hate me, they could blame me, but they could not erase me. As the meeting dissolved into murmurs and outrage, I felt strangely calm. Because this was no longer about money. It was about reclamation. That evening, I returned home and opened the window in the bedroom for the first time in years. Fresh air rushed in. I removed my wedding ring and placed it beside the locket on the dresser. 2 symbols. One of who I was. One of what I survived. I didn't throw them away. I didn't destroy them. I let them rest. Because endings don't always require fire. Sometimes they require clarity. And as I stood there, watching the curtains move with the breeze, I realized something profound. The funeral wasn't where I smiled because he hurt me. I smiled because he no longer could. And what came next would be entirely mine. The house began to change the moment I ped tiptoeing around it. Not physically, not yet, but energetically, like a place that had been holding its breath finally dared to exhale. I started small. I moved Darren's shoes out of the entryway. Not angrily, not ceremoniously. I placed them in boxes, taped them shut, and slid them into the garage like archived evidence from a closed case. Then I opened the windows. All of them. Cold air rushed through the halls, lifting curtains, stirring dust, carrying away the stale scent of years spent swallowing words. I stood in the middle of the living room and let the chill bite my skin, welcoming it. Pain meant circulation. Feeling meant life. That night, I dreamed of water, not drowning, floating. I woke up knowing something inside me had shifted permanently. The calls didn't. Darren's mother left messages that grew colder, more formal. Darren's sister moved from anger to strategy, offering meetings, mediators, compromises. The word settlement appeared often, always paired with generous. They wanted quiet. They wanted the problem, me, to resolve itself. I let them talk. I was no longer reacting. I was deciding. The lawyer called again midweek. There may be complications, he said carefully. Of course there are, I replied. Darren built his life on them. He hesitated. The trust Darren established, there's a beneficiary you weren't aware of. I closed my eyes. Elise, I said. Silence confirmed it. I've already spoken to her, I continued. She doesn't want it. The lawyer sounded genuinely surprised. That's unusual. No, I corrected gently. That's integrity. We scheduled another meeting, this time just him and me. When I arrived, he looked tired. This could turn ugly, he warned. The family is prepared to fight. I smiled faintly. So am I. He studied me. You've changed. Yes, I said. I ped apologizing for surviving. He slid a document across the desk. If you pursue this publicly, there will be scrutiny. I know. People will ask why you stayed. I know. They'll question your silence. I know. Are you ready for that? I didn't answer right away. I thought about the nights I lay awake listening for Darren's car. The mornings I rehearsed my tone so I wouldn't provoke him. The way I learned to read moods like weather forecasts. I thought about the funeral. About the smile. Yes, I said finally. I'm ready. The article came out 2 weeks later. Not sensational, not cruel, just honest. A quiet investigation into a respected man's private life. Financial discrepancies, undisclosed relationships. A contested will, no accusations, just facts. Darren's family was furious. I was relieved. Because the truth, once released, doesn't belong to anyone anymore. People began reaching out. Old friends. Co-workers. Even strangers. I didn't know. I'm sorry. That makes sense now. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Claire. I was married to him before you, it read. I wish I'd been braver. My hands shook as I typed back. You were brave enough to leave. She replied almost instantly. No, I left because he gave me permission. You stayed without it. I sat with that for a long time. Elise and I met once more. This time, not to talk about Darren. We met to talk about ourselves. I'm moving, she told me. New city. New job. I nodded. That sounds right. She hesitated. Do you hate me? I considered the question honestly. No, I said. I hate the version of myself who thought love meant disappearing. She smiled sadly. I'm trying not to become her. You won't, I said. You asked questions. She reached into her bag and pulled something out. The locket. She placed it on the table between us. I don't want it, she said. I pushed it back toward her. Neither do I. We laughed softly, two women freeing an object from its power. I think, she said, we're supposed to let it go. So we did. We walked to the river and dropped it into the water, watching the silver flash once before disappearing beneath the surface. No ceremony, no speech, just release. The final meeting with Darren's family happened on a gray afternoon. They sat stiffly across from me, eyes sharp, expressions rehearsed. The lawyer outlined the resolution. Assets divided fairly, the trust dissolved. No further disputes. Darren's mother didn't look at me once. His sister finally did. You got what you wanted, she said bitterly. I shook my head. No, I got what I needed. She scoffed. And what's that? I met her gaze calmly. My name back. When it was over, I walked out alone. No one followed. That evening I returned home and did something I'd never done before. I rearranged the bedroom. I moved the bed to the opposite wall, changed the lighting, replaced the sheets. The room felt unfamiliar, and that felt right. I stood in front of the mirror, studying my reflection. The woman staring back at me looked older, but stronger. There were lines around my eyes now, not from smiling too much, but from surviving without being seen. I touched my face gently. I'm here, I whispered, and for the first time, I believed it. The past no longer whispered behind me. It stood quietly, finally understood. And the future, wide, uncertain, mine, waited without judgment. All that remained was the final step. The last thing I did as Darren's wife, legally, officially, was walk through the house one final time. Not to mourn, to acknowledge. I walked slowly, deliberately, as if the walls were witnesses and I was finally ready to testify. In the hallway, I ped where the dent still lived beneath fresh paint. I touched it once, not with anger, but recognition. That mark had taught me how violence didn't always need fists. Sometimes it just needed silence afterward. In the kitchen, I stood by the counter where I once pretended to read recipes while listening to him laugh on the phone in the other room. I remembered how my body used to freeze, how my mind rehearsed excuses for him before he even returned. I no longer felt shame for that woman. She did what she needed to survive. In the bedroom, I opened the drawer one last time. The wedding ring lay there alone now. No locket beside it. No watch. No proof of him left to argue with. I picked up the ring, rolling it between my fingers. It was lighter than I remembered. Maybe it always had been. I carried it outside. The evening air was cool, gentle. The sky was streaked with soft gray and gold, the kind of sky that doesn't demand attention but earns it anyway. I walked to the oak tree at the edge of the yard, the one Darren once insisted on keeping because it added value, the one I secretly loved because it was older than all of us. I knelt, pressed my fingers into the soil, and buried the ring. Not as a ritual, as a return, metal to earth, lie to truth. Then I stood, brushed the dirt from my hands, and felt something close inside me. Not bitterness. Completion. A month later, the house sold. I didn't attend the closing. I mailed the keys. Some endings don't need witnesses. I moved into a small apartment downtown. Sunlight, tall windows, noise from the street below. Life happening all around me instead of behind closed doors. The first night there, I slept with the windows open. No locks double-checked, no footsteps memorized, just sleep. Real sleep. People still asked questions. They always would. Why did you stay? Did you ever love him? Do you regret it? I learned something important about questions. Some aren't meant to be answered. Not because they're too painful, but because they're too small. Love can exist alongside fear. Staying doesn't mean weakness. And regret is a luxury you earn once you're safe. I volunteered at a community center twice a week. Not because I needed to give back, but because listening to other women reminded me how survival often looks invisible from the outside. One afternoon, a young woman sat across from me, eyes downcast, hands twisting in her lap. "He says I'm nothing without him," she whispered. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. Because I remembered how powerful it felt when someone finally listened. When she looked up, I said gently, "He's wrong." She nodded slowly, like someone absorbing oxygen for the first time, and in that moment I realized something profound. My story didn't end with Darren. It began after him. On the anniversary of the funeral, I returned to the river, alone. The water moved steadily, indifferent to time, to people, to men who thought they could control outcomes. I sat on the bench where I'd once cried in my car and smiled again, this time softly, privately. I thought about that moment in the chapel. The gasp, the shock, the smile that startled everyone. People assumed it was cruelty. It wasn't. It was clarity. That smile wasn't for Darren. It was for me. Because in that moment, surrounded by grief that wasn't mine, I understood something that changed everything. When someone says, "I'm not your husband anymore," they think they're taking something from you. But sometimes they're giving it back. I took a deep breath and stood. The wind lifted my hair, cool and clean. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't waiting for justice or revenge or apology. I had something better. I had my name, my voice, my future. And somewhere, buried beneath an oak tree, rested a ring that no longer defined me. I walked away from the river without looking back. No music swelling, no dramatic pause, just a woman moving forward. And if anyone ever asks me again why I smiled at the funeral, I'll tell them the truth. Because that was the day I ped being his wife and started being myself.